Hello and welcome to Running Your Stories episode 27. Today I'm joined by Emma Forrester Thompson, who is, in her own description, a reluctant runner. Emma reluctantly started running, then started to find she was pretty good at it, and has since run a number of half marathons, and recently ran her first ultra. Emma joins us on the show today to share her story about how she got into running, what she gets out of running, and how that first ultra went. A really interesting story told in her own words, as we do here on Running Your Stories, and I think will be an inspiration to a lot of people who are out there trying to decide, should I give this a go, should I not? Well, have a listen to Emma's story and then go and sign up to do that event or that race that you were thinking of doing. Thank you. Welcome, Emma.
Hiya.
Been looking forward to speaking with you.
I'm a little nervous.
That's fine. Hopefully it will be like other guests I've got on who all tell me afterwards they really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll try and get into that. So we'll start off nice and slow, and I'm sure the conversation's going to flow as it just has been in the kitchen before we came in. So we'll start with the obvious place. When did you start running? How have you got into it?
Well, I've always been a walker by nature. I've done a lot of walking when I was younger. And then I think my first run, funnily enough, was round Linley in back end of 2009. I've always looked at other runners and thought, I don't fancy that. You know, seeing them at 6 o'clock in the morning out for a run when I'm on my way to work, and I've really thought it wasn't something that I would engage with. But I found myself in circumstances where I had a young child and worked 3 days a week and trying to fit in exercise with the lifestyle that I had. Somebody suggested, why don't you try running? I was like, nah, it's not for me. I'm not running. But actually gave it a go in a rubbish pair of trainers, and found that actually I could run. I was all right at it. I could manage, a little distance. Probably only ran sort of a couple of miles at a time, but then gradually built that up. And then I had an unfortunate incident personally, and it kind of instigated me to want to run Great North Run. And it was that really then captured me sort of running more regularly, building up my distance, and I ran it, I think it was 2011, and I did it in 2 hours and 1 minute. Well, it was 2 hours like 59 seconds or something like that, and I was so frustrated at the 59 seconds, and I'd had a loo stop, and I'd had to clean the toilet before I'd gone in it, so I was like, that's cost me the 69, the 60 seconds or whatever. I'm going back and I'm going to do it again. I also had it in mind that, having been at school with a girl whose dad ran the London Marathon every single year, and she'd come in every year with his Flora silver wrap or whatever, and I'd be a little bit jealous, a little bit envious, and I think there was something in me that always wanted to run a marathon as a consequence, albeit, as I've just said, I'd look at other runners and think, what the hell are you doing? So why I had this strong desire to run a marathon, I've kind of no idea. So I set myself the sort of target of running a marathon before I was 40, which was 2015. And I entered the Yorkshire Marathon for 2013, which was the first year that they did it in York. And then I was sort of partway through my training, just starting to up my distance, when I found out I was expecting my third child. So it put paid to sort of doing the marathon. And I actually went back to Great North Run in the 2014 after Peggy was born in the April. So I did that sort of 5 months when she was 5 months old. And in true classic style, she was a purely breastfed baby, and I had to feed her before I set off and then run to the end because she wouldn't take a bottle. And I think I got to the end and realised that I was in my tight running stuff, all sweating. I thought, how am I going to feed her? And I'd not had the foresight to think. So friends at the running club at the time were all like, not that I've ever been particularly embarrassed about that sort of thing, but I ran it in a far quicker time than I'd done previously. So I did it, I think, about 1 hour 50 or something like that. And still vowed that I would run a marathon before I was 40. But actually what I ended up doing was, I think I did it in the 2015, I was 40 in the September, and I did the Yorkshire Marathon as my first marathon in the October, sort of a few weeks later. So it's probably the worst birthday that I've had, because I just refused to drink. So I turned 40, I probably had half an ale or something like that. And then did the Yorkshire Marathon, it was probably about 2 weeks later, because my birthday's in September. So and I enjoyed the training. I enjoyed the camaraderie of the training. There was a group of us that would run and do our distance runs, fitting in, because the coach at Stainland Lions would arrange a plan for you, which I think for me it was very much like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly. Mm-hmm. So I had a framework to work towards, and my son played a lot of cricket, and it was summer training, so he was playing cricket throughout the summer, and I'd find myself doing hill reps at 9 o'clock at night to try and get them in, because I didn't want to skip a training session. I'm sure looking back there was probably one or two I probably did end up missing, but equally I'd be out at silly times to try and fit that in amongst the three children's commitments, and having the three children and working. So that's kind of what I ended up having to do. Equally, the long runs were always first thing in the morning, so I'd be getting up at 5 o'clock to fuel up, running 2 hours later, setting off at 7 o'clock in the morning. I mean, thankfully, the group of people that I was running with, or partly thankfully to the group that I was running with, but also because locationally I lived near the canal, everybody would meet near my house and we'd set off together. So it worked well for me as much as it did for them, but then I was the one with the most, probably logistically trying to fit it in, it was the most sort of difficult. So fully enjoyed the marathon training, and then I did the marathon, and I remember getting my number through the post, and I don't know about you when you get numbers, but I always look at them to see if it means anything, and the number that I got was 3456, and I wasn't particularly training for a specific time, albeit recognised that I could probably get in under 4 hours. And then I spoke to the coach before the event, and he said, oh, well, you're going for sub 345, aren't you? Because that was the cut-off for good for age for London at the time, at the age that I was. And I was very much like, no, I'm not going for that. Then maybe I could. And my number was 345, and I was thinking, right, if I can get 345 and something seconds, then this would be great. So I set off, and I remember at 8 miles seeing a vicar and giving him a high five and thinking, oh, this is just perfect. This is going well. Inevitably, I don't know how much you know about the Yorkshire Marathon, but there's sections of long out and backs. Mentally looking at everybody coming back the other way, it's quite a challenge to keep yourself going, especially as all that separates you and them is a row of cones. And I might have cheated with my sisters at board games, but there was no way I'd cheat myself out of in those circumstances. So I sort of remember running out and thinking, God, almost looking at people sort of with desperation, thinking, how far do we have to go now? Because I think they were around about 16 miles, and then the second one was at about, you were coming back up at about 21 miles, and it was a gradual hill. But again, first marathon, and you kind of don't know what to expect, how you're going to react, and just coming back up and at sort of 20, 21, 22, and I mean, you're nearly there, and you think, but then you sort of have to give yourself a bit of a talking to as well, because you're starting to suffer. But I'd done the training, so I knew that I was as prepared as I possibly could. I was at the start line. I felt well. I was, you know, I was reasonably, I'd not suffered with any niggles. So, you know, I just thought, I think you just have to tell yourself that and know that, trust in your training, I think, to an extent. And then I remember coming in at, I came in at 3 hours 42, I think. But the time on the clock, I think, was near 3:45. So I don't know, it was just, I keep trying to look back on pictures just to try and check and see what it was and see whether it was that. So, and then I just think as a consequence, I just carried on running with the club, enjoyed that aspect of running, enjoyed contributing to, you know, to those, to supporting other people as much as anything. And there was quite a group of us that at that time were kind of doing marathons and then doing another one and then doing another one. And whilst that's never been a massive desire, I think equally you've got to seize the opportunities that present themselves. And just going back to what we were talking about before, I'd never intended on doing Manchester Marathon, but I was training again with others that were doing London or Manchester, and a friend of mine had decided that he wanted to do a block of 100 miles in a week. Why, I don't know, why he had this strong desire to do 100 miles in a week. But I think he'd seen the determination that I had when I did the marathon training, because I said to him at one stage, why have you picked me? Why haven't you asked somebody else to do it with you? And he said, because I know you're determined and I know you'll do it. As soon as you set your mind to something, I know you'll do it. You know, because during the training for the marathon, I recall him saying to me, well, we'd only done 8 miles and we knew we had another 8 to do and probably more. And he said, oh, you know, you can walk. I was just like, it's not happening. I'll slow down, but I'm not walking. You know, I'm always going to keep going. So, and I think as a consequence of, you know, our training, or my training, him supporting at that time, he realised that if anybody was going to do it, it was going to be me. I don't know whether I don't know what that says about me. You know, I just think once I'd set my sights on something, that was it. I was going to do it. So we planned to do this 100 miles, or he mentioned this 100 miles. And I think this was the back end of, it would have been it was after I did the marathon. But then I had a hernia operation in the January, and it was only relatively minor. And most people that run, I think in any situation like that, it's like, well, when can I come back running again? You know, that's the first question you ask a doctor. You know, you've got to have something done to you. Well, when can I come back running? Oh, well, I'd give it at least, you know, a few weeks or whatever. Anyway, I asked him again, and they're like, well, maybe you can try a steady jog after, you know, maybe after a week. I seem to remember sort of giving it just under a week and thinking, but I feel fine, I'll give it a go. It was an umbilical hernia, so it wasn't like it was in my leg or anything. And I just thought, I'm going to go out. And I ran, and it was probably quicker than I should have been. But I felt fine. And I hadn't told Ian, the guy that had done the training, that wanted to do this 100 miles, and I'd not told him, but he found out that I was back running like a few weeks later. And he messaged me, he's like, so when are we doing this 100 miles? Now I've seen you back running. When are we doing this 100 miles? And I was just like, hang on a minute. I've only just come back after having a hernia operation. I'm not supposed to be doing anything sort of specific, or, you know, I'm just supposed to be plodding. Yeah, but I'm not on Strava, which annoys quite a lot of other people. You know, I've only ever used like a Garmin app, and I just won't be on Strava because I just don't want, you know, for whatever reason, I just don't want to be. Just being awkward, I think. But Ian had found out I was back running when we were doing this 100. I was like, all right, okay. So what we decided to do was coincide it with Easter, and he was only ever doing it for himself. He doesn't race. He's no interest in racing. So in essence, I was there because he wanted somebody to do it with. So we looked at how we would manage doing it in and amongst us both at work. obviously my 3 kids. So how are we going to fit it in? So we decided to do it in the lead up to Good Friday, I think it was. And at the time, we'd never intended on doing it for any kind of sponsorship or trying to raise awareness of anything. We just wanted to run it. But we decided that we'd ask for chocolate egg donations coming up to Easter. We'd give them to food banks and to the hospital. So that's what we did. And we set, I remember discussing kind of what distance we were going to do, how we were going to approach it, how we were going to tackle it. Do you start off with your biggest distances first and then get less and less and less, or do you go less first and then get greater and greater and greater? And we decided that we'd pretty much start big and get gradually less. So I think the first day we were doing probably like 20-ish miles, something like that, and then another same the next day. And again, we just found that we ran it, and we were comfortable running it, and I think much to the annoyance of other people that we were running with, that were training for marathons, who were struggling with the marathon training. And we'd done sort of like 20 miles one day, 20 the next day, and then similar the next day. And because we started into a weekend, I think we did the Saturday, Sundays, the high mileage, and then the Monday we started reducing. And I remember sort of doing a few days consecutive high mileage and going out with others, and they couldn't believe how kind of comfortable we felt in terms of still running sort of that distance. But it was, I don't know, perhaps it was better to be running to ease off whatever stresses and strains you had from the day before. I don't know. But again, we had quite good support, and people would meet us in Hebden Bridge or whatever and bring us Haribo or whatever. We managed. I think the last run we did was we did it with the running club. It was their main club night on the Thursday, and again felt entirely comfortable in just running. I had one of those roller stick things, and I was sort of massaging parts of me. But I think if you start off again, you're warming up again, and you're sort of able to carry on. So yeah, that was sort of, I think we finished it 2 weeks prior to the Manchester Marathon in the April, and I felt great. I felt in great shape, and I have chronic illness, which is ulcerative colitis, and that can flare up at any time. And it seemed to be sort of in abeyance. It was in control, and because I take medication regularly for it, but it's kind of unpredictable in terms of when it might flare up. And I just felt that I had an opportunity, because people were sort of saying, oh, you want to run Manchester Marathon, you want to do Manchester Marathon. And I messaged the coach and I said, what do you think about me running Manchester Marathon? And he said, don't do it, you'd be crazy. Right, I'm signing up. I was like, right, take me to wherever I need to sign up. So literally the day before the marathon, that was my only opportunity to sign up. And I went over with cash in hand, and I think it was like 75 quid to do the marathon or something. And I was a bit like, why am I partying with this 75 pounds to do this, to race this marathon around Manchester? Here you go, there you go, signed up. Came away with my number, and went back the morning after to do the run. And I set off, and I was loving it, like the first sort of up to probably about 10 miles. And then I got to half distance, and my watch like flashed at me going, half marathon PB. And I was like, that wasn't supposed to happen. I've messed this up. And I don't know whether mentally as well as physically, I just thought, oh God, what have I done? Carried on, got to 16 and sort of 17, and then ran past one of the Lions who's quicker than me, and he'd like done something to his ankle. And I was just like, do you want me to stop? No, you keep running. So I carried on, and again, talking to about 20 22 miles. Oh, and there were two 22-mile signs. So they'd put one 22 and then there was another 22. And I was thinking, you start thinking, am I hallucinating? I'm sure I've seen a 22 back there. I'm not doing an extra mile. Or you could see all the other runners like looking around going, it's fine, there was another one back there, you know, confirming, kind of, probably could see the confusion in your face, just like. So again, so then I finished that and I'd probably knocked about 8 minutes from the York before. So, and then I didn't have any strong desire really to do anything specific, albeit I knew I had a good age place for London, and you know, my recollection of this girl at school bringing in all this paraphernalia from London, I knew that I wanted to do it. So I set that for 2017 in the April. So I probably eased off a bit the running after the marathon, and then 16 weeks out from London started training again. But again, you know, it was always fitting it in with working and the children's commitments and making sure that, you know, I was well in myself to be able to run, given, you know, being on the medication and trying to keep that in control. And I think the training again, it went okay, but I think there was a slight shift change between my first marathon and then the desire to run London and run it well and do it justice, I suppose. And you know, I got to the start line again after, you know, decent stint of training that fit in, and I remember thinking, well, you're sort of obsessively checking the forecast as you do when you know you've got a big event coming up. And I probably went to the doctors as well, which I never do. I'm always well. I never go to the doctors unless I've got a marathon coming up, and then all of a sudden there's something wrong with me. Yeah, it's that classic paranoia, isn't it? And I just remember thinking, oh, it's going to be too hot. It's going to be a hot day, and I'm not very good in the heat. But as much as London seems to be a massive focal point for a lot of runners, I actually didn't enjoy it for whatever reason. It was probably my expectations. You know, I'd built it up. I was a 41 when I ran it, and I'd seen this girl come in since I was 4 with all this, you know. So over that time period, I've obviously built it up in my mind as being this amazing event, and you know, those that I knew that had run it had said what a fantastic event it was. So in my head I was thinking, it's, you know, it's like just running around a party time or whatever. I don't know, but for the first sort of 6 miles it was, well, certainly for the first bit, it was residential streets, and I just think there was an element of what am I doing at sort of 6 miles in, and with 20 miles still to go, thinking, oh, this isn't quite what I signed up for. But yet wondering whether it get better. And I think when you're doing distance, as much as I know your distance is far greater than my distance, it's all relative. And I think you have to sort of dismiss that negativity almost, because it just brings you down. So I think throughout all the marathons, it's a case of, you know, oh, I've got a niggle. No, I haven't got a niggle. I'm just warming up. And I think with that, it was a case of, you know, it must get better. And Tower Bridge was fantastic to run over. But kind of other than that, I remember just finishing and thinking, well, what was that all about? And being really disappointed that it wasn't how I expected it to be, which is rubbish when you've just run 26.2 miles and you're thinking, well, that was what it was. And but again, just and I think after that, even though I still knew that I'd probably have a good age place for a subsequent year, I was not particularly keen to rush back and do it again. But equally, it was at that time when I started thinking about the wall, the Hadrian's Wall Ultra, and thinking it was akin, I think in my head I was thinking it was akin to the walks that I did when I was younger with my dad, and thinking I'd looked at the scenery. I've never been to Hadrian's Wall, never seen it, and I just, for me, I think it could have been 5 miles, it could have been 10 miles, it could have been 100 miles, but regardless, because of the scenery and what I'd seen about it, I thought I really want to give it a go. And I had considered doing it, following on from London in 2017, speaking to James about it, and he was like, yeah, it's achievable, you know, you can just up your distance and you can do it. But I had a niggle and I talked myself out of it, so I never entered it and never did it. But I had talked to Ian, the 100 Mile Ian, about the event, and saying it's something of interest. And I knew that I would never enter something on my own, something like that on my own. I've always liked the company of others, I think, and equally in a distance like that, as much as like with marathons, I've been able to run it on my own. I think, it's, obviously with everybody else around you, but with that, I just felt like I needed that. I don't know, it's been that the comfort of knowing somebody else was there, I think. So I didn't do it in the 2017. I didn't enter it, and I thought I'm going to go back and do London, but I'm going to do it 2 years later when I'm 2 years older, and I can't put pressure on myself to either equal or better the time that I had, because I think that was part of the detraction of the event, was thinking I need to run this in a specific time, albeit I'd not really sort of set my sights on a specific time, but I was sort of just shy of, well, I think I was 3:32:47, I think, in 2017. So you find that runners will be like, well, you can do it in 3:30, you can do it in sub 3:30, but I had no strong desire to, which is why I say that. I thought, well, if I go back in 2019, the children are older, they'll have all their commitments. My excuses will be that I haven't run it quicker because I've had all this going on. Why I need an excuse, I don't know, but I've always been happy with marathon times, I think, been always happy with those. So, because I knew I had a good for age, but they changed the system for London, so they restricted the number of good for age places and they split them. So not only did you have to be good for age, but within your age category, you had to be sort of one of the quickest because of the way that they split it. So I was unsure as to whether I'd still qualify. Thankfully or otherwise, I don't know. I did qualify for a 2019 place, and I thought, well, and Ian was starting talking about the wall, and I thought, well, why don't I set the wall as my goal, and the marathon in the April will be part of the training for the wall, which then gives me another reason why I might be slower, because I'm 2 years older, I've got lots of kids commitments, and I'm training for the wall, which is a far steadier, it's endurance, so it's a far steadier pace. And then things went pear-shaped at home, and due to other circumstances, I went through a separation, and trying to manage that as well as everything else going on. I was back at work full-time as well in the January, and so I was trying to sort of manage the separation, the 3 children, the working, and then the training on top of that. And I never bothered asking for a plan from coach this time, because I'd got my one from before, and I thought I can follow that, and I can't take it too seriously this time because I'm focusing on the wall. And I'd sort of semi-looked at training plans for the wall, and I just thought, well, as long as I'm doing some I'm getting my distancing and upping my mileage and getting to a good distance on a Sunday, far greater than a marathon, it'd be fine. But actually what happened was I only managed to just scrape my training for the marathon in the April, and I was probably doing maximum 3 runs a week. I was making sure I got my long run in on the Sunday. I was actually running with a girl who was doing her first marathon in Manchester a few weeks prior, so I was probably actually running steadier than I would normally. So I was probably having longer time on my feet, but I didn't feel like I was completely underprepared when I went to the start line for the marathon, which is not like me at all, because in previous marathons I've done my utmost to make sure I've got my training in, but the only thing I managed to do was probably get a couple of reasonable runs in during the week, and then the long running on the Sunday, or the Saturday, or the Friday. Sometimes I had to flex off work and then get my distance in that way. So it was sort of challenging to rejig things and be more flexible in terms of my approach to my training, and then started doing a strength class, which I thought would help in terms of sort of underpinning the rest of the training, and I genuinely believe it did. And I would, if I was ever doing any sort of training again, then I would certainly drop a run for a strength, some kind of form of strength training, because I found it incredibly beneficial. Yeah, I got to, I'm trying to think whether I even got to 22 miles before the marathon. I must have done, or somewhere near. But I made the London weekend, less about the marathon, I think, and more about a weekend in London with a marathon thrown in. And I think mentally that probably helped reduce the pressure in terms of the expectations. And I think there's a certain amount of people at the club who are, yeah, but you'll do it, you'll be fine, you'll do it. And it's all right, them saying that, but if you don't believe that, then it becomes a difficult thing. And it's always been the case where I suppose I do wind myself up about events, and you'll be fine, but I might not be, everything might go wrong. So I went down and did it, and the support that I had down there, I managed to spot them en route, which is always nice, because having done, I think it was London in the 2017, and I knew there were going to be certain people en route and I never saw them, and again it's that, didn't see him, and feeling deflated, and then trying to pick yourself back up and then carry on. Whereas at least at London this year, those that I wanted to see, I managed to see. So albeit one was slightly distracted by another spectator who was, they were talking about who they were spotting en route, and all of a sudden I come round the corner, they're still in conversation and explaining to each other who they're spotting, and I'm like, hello, I'm coming past now. So, and you're like gone then, aren't you, for something like that. It's like, there you are, no, you're gone again. So for a brief few seconds I was there, and it was fine. And I got to the end of London this year, and I can say that it was a good experience. So I'm walking away from London with a positive, I suppose, at the end of the day. And I've not entered this for Good for Age next year, which I probably could have done, whether I do it. And I think is it the 40th next year as well, which was slightly clouding my judgment in terms of whether I should or shouldn't enter. I was like, but it's the 40th one. No, I don't. So I talked myself out of entering. And then obviously I had the wall in the June to sort of think about. And one thing I've learned about these things is never let your partner arrange your accommodation for before or after the event. because of everything that was going on personally at home, I'd said to Ian, you just tell me where I need to be, what I need to take, and what I'm doing, and that's fine. And I'll turn up and I'll give it a go. And so Ian had arranged what we were doing in terms of transport and travel and accommodation. And we had tried to meet up between having done the marathon and the wall to do a couple of training runs, and they turned into sort of run walks and no more than 10 miles, and we probably only did a couple of them between, I think it was something like the 28th of April, the marathon, and I think the wall was the 15th of June. I'd done the Calderdale Way relay, one of the legs for the club race. So there was 8 miles there, and then other than that, the only other running that I did was this bit of run walking with Ian before the actual event. So I knew I was under prepared. I knew I'd not done what I'd set out to do when I'd entered, which was to be the focus. I had no idea how I was going to cope with the distance. I didn't even know what shoes should I be wearing off-road shoes? Should I be wearing road shoes? Obviously, I'd seen pictures and I'd done some degree of looking at what it entails. So I knew that it was a run from Carlisle to Newcastle, and I knew they were advertising it as 69 miles, although it wasn't. And I knew there was pit stops, and that's about all I knew. And it looked great, you know, the countryside and everything looked marvellous. And I thought, Hadrian's Wall as well, I get to see that. So this is going to be a good event. But then underprepared, and we travelled up to Newcastle on the Friday. I drove, and there was an accident on the motorway, so that delayed us. So a journey that we were supposed to get into Newcastle for I don't know, maybe 4 o'clock or something. I think we were like an hour and a half late, and we knew we had a train to get from Newcastle to Carlisle. And so we ended up running from where we dumped the car for the apartment to the train station, and just made the train. And I just remember sitting on the train and thinking, as it travelled along, I think I've got to run all this distance back. And it suddenly dawned on me that the train journey, I think, between Newcastle and Carlisle was about an hour and a half, something like that. I just remember stopping at train stations and seeing all this outdoor space and thinking, oh, I've got to run. I have got to. The only way back is to run back, and thinking, okay, right. Tried not to think too much of it, but obviously recognised that this was happening and I'd have to run this distance back. Anyway, we got into Carlisle and picked our numbers up, had our bags checked, and then set off to the accommodation, which I understood was it was 1-bedroomed accommodation, and Ian and I were more like brother and sister, and I thought I can cope with one night and it'll be fine. And then when we got there was two rooms, but one room didn't have a curtain, so I put my running jacket over and just managed to kip in there. And got to the start, dumped our bags at Carlisle, and that was sort of like 7:15 in the morning on the Saturday morning, ready to run back. And I think one of the things that I was most worried about was the weather, because June the 15th could be, I think it was 15th, could be red hot, and I knew that for me with running would not be a great combination, but thankfully the forecast was probably near enough perfect in terms of initial running conditions. It was fine, but it was cool when we set off at 7 o'clock in the morning. It was nice. It was pleasant running, just really nice running. We had to run through a field of cows, which I've had an experience with cows, and and I don't run through fields of cows anymore, but they seemed all right, and there was loads of us obviously initially at Carlisle, so I thought it can't be that bad running through these cows. And I think they were just looking at us thinking, what the hell are you doing? This line of sort of people coming through with the kit on, and little did they know that we still had 68 miles to run. And just it's just crazy concept to think, that you're going to set off to try and run 69 miles. And I think the first pit stop, it was about 15 miles. And I'd lost Ian on the way. And I'd started talking to other people, and it sort of soon became clear to me that as much as I'd intended on running it as a pair, that actually, and I thought I'd need that support, that there was other people around, you know, similar situations. So I came into the pit stop before Ian and sort of refueled, filled up water, nipped to the loo, and then I sort of was thinking about heading off out, and then Ian came in, so we actually set off back out together. But again, the same thing happened. I ended up coming into the second pit stop before him, and I just decided at that point, so that would have been about 24 miles in, and I just decided at that point that I needed to sort of look out for myself and just run at my own pace, and it would be fine because there were other people on the route that I could speak, you know, talk to, and that's essentially what I did, and just set off out of there. And my strategy was to just run the bits that I could run and walk the bits that I felt would not be in my best interest. So there was no way I was running up steep hills, because I just think that's counterproductive, you know, when you've got a kind of a distance to go through. We didn't see the Hadrian's Wall for 17 miles. That was the first time I saw it. Sadly, I didn't get a picture with it, and I kind of wish I had now. But I think at that point I was probably on my own, and I probably felt too self-conscious to start taking selfie. I'm taking some selfies against Hadrian's Wall. I know I've still got however many miles to run, but I'm gonna take a picture. And there was loads of other people, I suppose, taking pictures. But yeah, I couldn't believe that it had taken 17 miles to see the wall. And the terrain itself was sort of quiet roads and then off-road, and I'd worn road shoes which were fine, other than it rained later on in the run, and then we had to go through like woodland and stuff. And if you've ever tried to run in woodland, muddy woodland, in road shoes, it was a bit problematical.
Yeah, I've been there and done that.
It's just like, what am I doing again? Why have I got these shoes on? But equally, it was only for quite short periods of time, so it was kind of doable. And they were right in advising road shoes, I think, because of the fact that it not rained prior to the run, and quite a large proportion of it was track or quiet country roads. So, but yeah, it was just it's kind of crazy in terms of the distance that you're sort of covering. And then I do admit to taking selfies only where it was the boards that were sort of saying, you know, 44 miles down, whatever to go, and then periodically along the route. So I did take some of those, and they're quite funny because they start off very smiley. You know, I'm clearly enjoying myself, and then gradually they just get moodier and moodier and to the point where I'm just like, I think there was probably one where I didn't even bother taking it because I just thought, I'm just peed off now, I'm not doing it anymore. And I think it was hard in some ways because the pit stops were great, but for me they reminded me that I was on my own, because like you were saying before about wife meeting you at certain points to sort of cheer you on or you know, support you en route. It was clear that most people that were doing it had support at every pit stop, and they were meeting people at every pit stop. And I think, you know, you're coming in and they were sort of hugging whoever they were seeing, and you know, keep going and it'll be fine. And I didn't have that. I mean, I'd publicised the fact that I was doing it, but partly because I just wanted to do it, and I just wanted to, I don't know, get on with it and not see it as oh, look at me, look at what I'm doing. But I'd not expected like my parents to go up or anything like that, and so I didn't have that support. And the same faces were turning up time and time again, and they'd see you, and they started to an extent. There was a lady running it, and she had this Land Rover full of women that were just periodically turning up en route, ringing cowbells and then offering, you know, sweets and stuff, which I was kind of conscious that for the wall they'd said that there would be no, you know, your pit stops were basically where you took on food and drink, and that was it. And it wasn't breaking the rules, but you know, it was a little bit of cheating if you were not, you know, if you weren't doing it other than there. So I was adamant that I was going to eat what I'd taken other than obviously the pit stops. But this group of this like posh Range Rover just kept randomly turning up and it'd be like, oh, it's them again. And they started sort of supporting, oh, you're looking really great. And you're thinking, I'm not, I'm a drowned rat now, and my feet are killing, and I've got a monk on now because I just want to get to the finish. But so that was difficult, I suppose, along the way, because people were setting off out of those pit stops with their loved ones or whatever, whoever it was, and then obviously then seeing them at a subsequent stop. But equally, you know, I was doing it and that was it. And then I remember coming into Hexham, which was the advice from those that had done it before, who were helping out at checking in your bags and stuff, was sort of saying, take a good break at Hexham, because it was the one where they were giving hot food. And I think I came into Hexham at sort of tea time, it was about 6 o'clock, something like that. They were sort of saying, have a good break, you know, change your clothes, because we'd done a bag drop that they'd transferred to there to change clothes and stuff. And they, to be fair, all the support, the rat race people that were supporting, they were brilliant. They just couldn't do enough for you, and, you know, filling up your drinks and stuff. And I just remember looking at them and just saying, I feel broken and I just want to cry. And they turned around and went, just have a good cry then, you'll be fine. That's what a lot of other people have done, and then just carry on. I'm just thinking, I think if I start crying, I might not stop. and that's the danger. So I didn't cry, which, as an emotional person, I'm quite surprised. And I just remember taking the advice that, you know, having a 30-minute stop or whatever, changing what I needed to change, and then setting off out again, which was kind of interesting in itself, because there were various people's dinner on the road as you were heading off out, which was disgusting. And you're just like, oh, I don't want to see it. You know, I'm struggling enough. And yeah.
Well, that's fairly normal in Hexham.
You see it? Yeah. It was just like, oh, the route was just, for the first mile or so, having never done an ultra, it was like, is this normal? You know, to come out of a pit stop and there just be puke everywhere. It's like, oh. So you just ignored that and carry on. And at this point, the weather hadn't been great, and we had some rain, but then we were starting to get to a point where we were starting to think it was like coming into nightfall. And I think there was a checkpoint after Hexham, and we were told basically that we needed to put our head torches on at that point. And I think if you've ever done any walking at that sort of coming into evening time, because your eyes start adjusting, you don't realise how dark it's becoming. So actually to be told to put your head torch on was probably the right thing. And again, I think the further you got into the race, the more spread out people had become. A lot of that part I was probably on my own, albeit I always tried to keep somebody that I could see in front, and just carried on regardless, I think. And I guess as it got darker, it was harder to sort of appreciate your surroundings. And then coming into the last pit stop, which was at 62 miles, I think prior to that, I'd started speaking to somebody on the route called Chris, who had done the, I think they call it Tour of Arran, which is another rat race event, and he'd done that. And so we'd sort of had a bit of chat. And at this point, I remember thinking that I'm hurting now. And I'd not had the foresight to because I can't take ibuprofen because of my condition. I'd not had the foresight to put any other painkillers in either. And I don't know why. Maybe I'd been naive enough to think that I wouldn't hurt at any point. But I just remember thinking, oh, I wonder if anybody's got any painkillers. And he did have. And he started sort of, I'll get them out of my bag. I was like, no, let's leave it till the pit stop. And so I came into the pit stop, and it was about midnight. And I came in before Chris, and I sat down. And again, the team from Rat Race, again, just couldn't do enough for you. You know, they were rallying round, and can we get you anything? What can we do? And it was just like, just give me anything that'll make me feel better. And I just sort of remember, and I was cold at that point. I remember feeling really cold, and I remember sitting there shivering. And then Chris came in, and I managed to get the painkillers from him. And he sort of sat down and sort of started sorting himself out or whatever in terms of, you know, refueling or whatever. And I just remember sitting there, and out the corner of my eye I saw this guy in the corner who'd obviously covered the same distance as me, who was broken. And I just thought to myself, I hope he doesn't give up. And he was only sat a couple of metres away, and I could have said to him, don't give up. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't bring myself to say it. I think because I was just so exhausted that as much as I was thinking it, I just couldn't find the words to, and he pulled out, and he didn't carry on. And somewhere up to Hexham, somewhere sort of, must have been, not Hexham, must have been beyond Hexham, between Hexham and the last pit stop, that I'd periodically been checking my phone, and I'd had a missed call from Ian. And it was about 9 o'clock, and Ian had been pulled out with at the time it was something to do with his back, and it just made me thankful that I'd not waited for him from the outset. But yeah, going back to this pit stop, I was just sat there just seeing people come in and thinking, I wonder if I look as bad as they do, and I hope I don't look as bad as they do. Thankfully there was no mirrors, and just thinking, I've only got 7 miles to do, but kind of on the back of 62, and it was pitch black and it was freezing, and thinking 7 miles, I can run that in an hour, you know, but knowing I'm not running this at that pace, and thinking I just want to get to the end. And stupidly I took my shoes off, my running shoes, which was a big mistake, and I could see the state of my feet, and I tried to dress them. Well, no, at that point I looked at my feet and I thought, what the hell am I going to do about my feet? Because they were just literally huge blisters in all sorts of places. And I sort of not pleaded, but I sort of probably looked at the support team, and I was just like, have you got anything that I can put on these? And they're like, I don't think so. Really kindly, sort of. I don't think they really want to tell me, like, you know, there's nothing we can do for you. You might be able to put them in a bowl of salted water or something. I was just thinking, why would I sit here with my feet in some salted water before I've got another 7 miles to do? And I sort of consciously decided and said to myself, my body is not going to hurt any more than it is hurting now. My feet aren't going to hurt any more than they're hurting. But I did try and put some plasters on them, which I live to regret. So I dressed them with the stuff that I'd taken myself. And I remember Chris sort of saying to me, right, take these painkillers. We'll fill because we had to carry a reusable cup. I think it was part of their sort of trying to become more environmentally conscious, which was great. So we both filled our cups up with strong coffee with God knows how many sugars in them. And it was his suggestion to set off walking out with the hot drinks and then see where we got to. So we set off out together, and I'm so thankful that we did, because some of the parts of the outskirts of Newcastle that we were walking, I'm not really sure that I'd want to be walking at that time, running, whatever we were supposed to be doing at that point, on my own. Because like I've just said, you know, you were so spread out at that point that there was barely anybody around. So we did do some run walking, and that's how we got to the finish. But we got to the quayside at, what was it? It was 2:00 on a Sunday morning. So inevitably, you're coming into a place like Newcastle when it's probably been, you know, busy as anything, you know, night on the town or whatever. So it was a bit weird, really, coming into sort of Newcastle at that sort of time, and we're both sort of looking to checking to see how far we'd got to go, and then just made it to the end between us, and we ran sort of the last bit and into to where it finished at, I think it was HMS Calliope on the opposite side of the river, and just sat down, and it was strange because I didn't really, as much as they were providing food and stuff, I didn't especially feel hungry or anything. It was what was it, 2:20 in the morning, and just bizarre, and sort of seeing the odd people that you'd seen on route coming in, and or that had already finished before you, and then I had an interesting night's accommodation to look forward to, thanks to Ian, which was terrible. I know we're here to talk about running, but really, do not ever trust somebody else to book your accommodation, because I'd obviously spoken to him after he'd pulled out, and he said he was already at Newcastle. They'd ferried him to the end, and I said, oh well, you might as well go back to the apartment and get some shut-eye, because, you know, I'm not going to be finished for another, well, I don't know what time I'm going to finish. So if he'd been pulled out at 9:00, I knew he could be in bed by 10, and then I'd finish whenever I did. I said, I'll ring you when I've finished. So it's sort of 2:30 in the morning, I ring him, and you know, he's get him out of bed or whatever, and I said, I'll be back, you know, shortly. So, you know, expect me to be back. And I went back to the apartment probably about, by the time I'd sort of sat down and got my bags and stuff, it was probably coming up to 3:00 in the morning. And buzzed the apartment and went up, and he's peering round the door. And I come in, and he's talking in hushed tones, and I'm thinking, why are you talking in hushed tones? And then it dawned on me that there was somebody else in the apartment, and he'd booked an apartment, I don't know whether it was an Airbnb or what, but the guy whose apartment was still there in bed, and I'd come in at 3:00 in the morning having done 69 plus miles, and I was just like, well, where am I sleeping? And he said, well, you can sleep in the bed, you know, it's a double bed here. And I'm like, I'd had the foresight to put a sleeping bag in the car, which I'd taken up with me just in case. And I was just like, I'm not sleeping in, I know, that's not happening. I'm not, and there was nothing in it. It was just like, this is your accommodation. So it's all right, I'll just sleep on the sofa in the lounge. So I literally was in a small, like, walking sleeping bag, having done this epic distance, and all I had was, I didn't have a shower or anything. I just literally took off what was wet, got in the sleeping bag. There was no curtains in the room. And I think the adrenaline was still going. And I was laid on this sofa, and I was thinking, I wouldn't give anything to be in a nice warm double bed now. But I just sat there thinking, God, I've just run 69 miles. Why am I on the sofa when he's pulled out at bloody 9:00 at night, having only got to Hexham in 44 miles? And then to make things worse, I vaguely could hear this clattering noise, and I couldn't work out what it was. And I don't mind animals, but there was a cat trying to get its food, and then it was just like bothering me. And I just thought, oh, this is the worst possible end to any race that I've ever done, and it's the furthest distance, and I'm laid on this sofa, and then I got cramp having obviously done this, and I couldn't stretch my leg because I was in a bloody sleeping bag, and I just got more and more annoyed, and I just thought, this is not the way it was supposed to be. But anyway, I think I just whiled away the hours, and sort of periodically dropped off, and then came round, and then I think it got to sort of probably 6:30 in the morning, and I thought, well, I'm just going to get a shower and just get myself sorted, ready to go, and then started messaging Ian at sort of 7:00 in the morning, going, right, I'm ready to go now, because I just got to that point of wanting to go home and be in my own bed in my own atmosphere, and it was the kind of the weirdest end to a to that sort of thing. I was just like, why would you even book that? And then why am I sleeping on the sofa? It was just ridiculous. And so coming back, I couldn't. Oh, and that was the other thing. I'd sort of taken my socks off and looked at my feet, and because of the way that I'd applied the dressings, and because of the number of blisters that I had, the dressings had crossed over into other blisters. So when I took it off, it was the worst possible scenario you can imagine. So I think I was cross about that. I was cross about the accommodation, and it wasn't quite the celebratory end that I kind of anticipated. So I was just glad when he finally got his ass out of bed and we were ready to head home. And I just said to him, look, you can drive because I'm not driving. Because there was no way I was driving home. I'd driven up, and then to have that and no sleep, I said, you're a better place to drive because you've been back. Oh, and his back was fine as well. Even though he pulled out because of his back, his bloody back had miraculously mended itself. So yeah, it wasn't the greatest end to an event that I've had. So I think that my advice to anybody that's doing any sort of event like that is to make sure you've got decent accommodation booked and you've not relied on a supposed friend to book it.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting point in general, even other than the relying on the friend bit. I know I've done kind of big events, end up far end of the country somewhere, and not always thought a lot about how I'm getting back from it afterwards. And I've got lucky so far. After the Lakeland 100, after I'd finished, I'd had a wobble and I'd actually passed out and I'd ended up in the medical tent.
Oh no!
And luckily, there was a guy I know, Michael, who'd gone to support somebody else, and his mate had pulled out, and so he'd started supporting me.
Oh, right.
Really nice of him. And he ended up helping half carry me because I was sleeping in a tent next to my car. So he half carried me to my car, folded the seats down because it was chucking it down with rain as well. So I could crawl into the back of the car. He took my shoes off for me, helped me take my shoes and socks off.
Oh, bless him.
I got myself sorted out and crawled into my tent, but without that kind of help, and it just feels so good when somebody puts themselves out to help you. Like you're saying, you kind of feel like I've just achieved something here. Maybe I deserve a little. I know. I wouldn't go so far as pampering, but to not have to just do everything yourself. And
well, I think it was before the weekend that I suddenly must have sort of in my head thought, who's driving what, because if both of us have covered that amount of distance, will either of us want to drive?
Yeah.
And I think I'd sort of started looking at other friends. Does anybody fancy a weekend in Newcastle? Because I'm prepared to pay for you 2 nights in Newcastle if you'll drive us back. Because I just thought, up until probably the week of the event, I'd not really given it. No,
I mean, with that one, I was driving myself back. And I had kind of said to my dad and my wife beforehand, if I get injured in this race, would you mind if you both drive up so one of you can drive my car back?
Yeah.
Because it would have been, my only option. Had I got injured in the previous 200 milers I did, there was no way I could have driven back from.
No.
So
I
managed this time.
No, I mean, I don't even know if I could have physically driven because of the blisters on my feet. I don't even know if I could have done it.
Yeah.
I'm probably, easily gone into cramp or whatever. So how you drove back, I have no idea.
Not really sure.
No.
But no, I think it's a very, very interesting story. First of all, so I've thoroughly enjoyed hearing it, and it's I'm sure it's been great for the listeners to hear your story without me needing to interrupt along the way.
No, I'm probably bored and babbled and bored.
Definitely not. But a couple of things to kind of come on to and just expand on a little bit. I'm interested to know if through the marathons that you've done, and now, and this is a significant ultra. I mean, a lot of people, their first ultra is like a 30-mile, 50k.
Yeah, people told me that before I
it's
decided to do
yeah,
it, and
yeah,
only like weeks up to it going. Do you not think like a 30-mile ultra would have been like
so,
an introduction?
I
was just like, no, because this is the one that I want to do. I don't want to do those ones.
Yeah, I mean, I managed to just squeeze a 30-miler in before because I went from a marathon, 4 weeks later a 30-miler,
right,
and then a 100-miler.
Yeah.
Which I don't recommend.
No.
But
no.
Has it helped you mentally, sort of away from running? Do you think it helps to develop resilience, or?
I would say so. I think so, and I think although I sometimes think that I'm a different character in those sorts of circumstances than I am in day to day. But I would, if I thought about it, I think it has.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said previously, I am very much a person that enjoys company and the support of others, and I think I've surprised myself at being able to do that event without having a constant specific person of support, because I think I always felt that that's probably what I'd need to be able to achieve it, but yet I've never needed that in a marathon distance, albeit the training, certainly the training that I did for the first one was with a group of people. I think subsequently it was, a lot of the training was then done on my own, and I think you do a certain amount of self-counselling as part of that process, and I think to an extent it's probably shown me how committed or determined, I think people would say determined, I am to, once I've set my mind to something, to not give up, with the circumstances that surrounded kind of my life at the time going up to the ultra. I remember sort of thinking, well, I've not really trained like I wanted to. How the hell am I going to do it? And a friend of mine sort of said to me, you'll be more peed off if you don't get to if you're not on the start line, if you just don't go, than if you go and see what happens. I've never had a DNF in any event that I've done, and I would say that I was slightly kind of terrified that might happen. But equally, I kind of set off with no doubt in my mind that I would complete it. I knew there was nothing in my head that was ever saying, you're not going to do this. And I think having done the amount of walking that I did when I was younger, I think it's certainly perhaps given me a good foundation for the distances that I've been able to achieve, and the kind of more endurance side of it. So I suppose, it teaches you things about your character that you perhaps didn't know, in a positive way. Yeah.
I mean, I've found the same to a massive extent, and it's interesting hearing your story, because you've started in that kind of group supportive environment and then sort of broken out from it, whereas I kind of almost went in at the deep end running solo. I'd done my first Spine Challenger before I even joined a running club. I was very much kind of wanting to prove things to myself and make things harder for myself than they needed to be. So it does sound like a really good way that you've done it, to have that sort of group and support, and then as you become more experienced and you can sort of get out there and do the things.
I joined the running club partly because I knew I wanted to do a marathon, and because I thought I'd need that support to facilitate that, which is why I did join. And at that stage, I would never call a run a race. And I remember going and them saying, well, what races have you done? I was like, none. I'd done the Great North, but I didn't treat it as a race. And I think the events that I've done, I don't necessarily still don't see them as a race, because then to me they're not. You're doing an event that is a run for you, and I suppose you're talking semantics, but it's different emphasis. I think completely different emphasis.
Yeah, it is. I do understand what you're trying to say. I'm not sure I can explain it any better, but as you say, and I'll just refer to my Lakeland 100, just because it's the last big event that I did. But exactly as you say, especially for me with big things, actually I could go into something like park run and think of it as a race.
Yeah.
Because
it's not though, is it? It's a run.
Exactly, and that's
it's
something
part run, not part race.
Exactly, and that specifically isn't a race. Yet I could more easily treat it as a race.
Same, probably.
Yeah. Whereas on a really big event where you're out for hours and hours and hours, I find that I need to frame it, as you say, just as an event. I want to go out and actually tell my kids, look, I'm going to go out into the hills and play with my friends for the next 20 odd 30 hours.
Crazy.
Wouldn't you love to do that? And they're like, well, actually, I'd like to play with my friends for that long, but can we do it inside?
That's not the deal.
And it's just, and it helps me to live in the moment by not thinking of it as a race. Yeah. Because a race is all about getting to the end and having that focus on the end and the focus on the time. And if I do that, what you've described about putting pressure on yourself and things, I've had exactly the same things go through my mind.
It's counterproductive, I think.
Yeah.
And certainly with the war, I think my focus from the outset was to get to the first checkpoint, to the first pit stop, which was 15 miles, and then to the next pit stop, and then to the next pit stop, and that was all. It was never. I kind of compared it to writing an essay. For people that don't engage with running, when you're a student, you've got a 20,000 word essay, and you're like, oh my god, how am I even going to do this? Yes. You break it into chunks, don't you? And you approach each chunk, and that's how you get to the finish point. And I think that's how I approached the ultra, because if I sat there and I thought I'm about to run 69 miles, I think it's like you're just burdening yourself with it, rather than saying, right, well, yeah, that might be the end goal, but let's focus on 15 miles, then another 9, and then another whatever, and then by which time you've broken the back of it. And it was difficult, I think, realising at halfway and seeing the sign, you're just over halfway, you've still got 34 miles or whatever it was, and thinking, and I think that was the turning point for me. Like, I'd loved it up to that point, and then realised I had the same distance to go. But again, you've got to say, right, next bit, then the next bit. Don't, try and see it as a massive chunk of something that you've still got to achieve.
Yeah. I mean, it takes practice, and I've been working a lot on the mental side of it. And again, I was really pleased with it in the Lakeland 100, because I got to 95 miles and looked at it and said, there's 10 miles left to go. So I ran about 3 times faster than I'd ran up to that point. Yeah. And smashed out the finish. Yeah. Because I'd been holding back, knowing that I didn't want to be too tired before the end. Yeah. And got to 10 miles to go and thought, well, stop holding back now.
Yeah, can go for it.
I can use whatever I've got left. Yeah. And it's the first time I've really been able, well, it's definitely the first time I've been able to do that in an ultra, where I've got towards the end, the last sort of 10% of it, or whatever distance you're at, and feel like actually
you've got something.
Yeah, I feel okay here. Although one of the things that that you said in there as well was a lesson that I only learned after the event, after my first big ultra, and that was the fact that when you're in pain, you're going to be in pain, and that pain's going to continue until you finish.
Yeah.
And so you might as well get on with it and go as fast as you can.
Yeah.
Whereas what I did on my first one was I let the pain get on top of me, and I got slower and slower and slower, and I dragged out what could have been, in the state I was in, I wasn't going to be going very fast, but maybe it would have been 6 hours of pain. I probably dragged it out by 16.
Oh, God.
And so, reflecting on that, I learned the lesson about when you're in pain towards the end of the race.
Kind of just have to accept it and
just
move on.
accept it and move on.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think you've done really well recognising that first time round.
Yeah.
I
think you've got to, though, because I mean, what choices did I have? Do I just get consumed in agony and think I'm just going to give up? Because you could see it around you, you could see it happening, and I don't necessarily think anybody in that room was any more broken than I necessarily was, but I think it's just having that switch in your mind to say, well, it is not going to get any worse, and I can do this.
Yeah. I've since been introduced to a whole set of techniques, and we're going to do a podcast focused on that.
Okay.
With Jared, who teaches it and coaches it.
Yeah.
I was just talking to him earlier this week and saying that we're definitely going to get on with putting that podcast together, which we've been talking about for at least 6 months. Because he coaches kind of a unique form of mental resilience and mindset. And what he teaches is for all parts of life. I've actually been using him as a coach and mentor for my work. Yeah. And it's made me a faster runner, and a stronger runner. Yeah.
I think there are elements that people say about being mindful, and I think leading up to the wall and sort of the experience of other people and seeing how it's important to seize the moment and be in the moment, and I don't think I perhaps quite appreciated that as much as when I did the marathon in April and then the wall, and just recognising that this is your one opportunity you're never going to go back to that moment again, so seize it and I think that and acknowledge it and appreciate it, and there was certainly a lot of that sort of en route, because for me I think I knew that I probably will never go back and do it again, but
I think maybe next year you maybe go and do a different
possibly
event of that kind of distance.
I mean, I quite fancy the Arran, the Tour of Arran.
I've heard good things about that, and the Hardmoors races.
Yeah, well, that sounds
60 or Hardmoors 80.
Might look at that. No, I don't know.
The 60 is very nice.
I think just not the problem, but the challenge of sort of fitting in a good amount of training to support your event when it comes to it is the balance that you'd have to take. And I think having done 4 marathons, so I did my first in 2015 and the last this year, and sort of recognising that each marathon's 16 weeks of training, so that's a year of training that I've done, and I suppose trying to balance that with family life and everything, work and everything else. It's it is a challenge, and you do need sort of good support. I think a reasonable support network, but also I think you need your own sort of determination to say, well, that's what I'm going to do, and you work it in and don't give up. And I certainly would. Other than I think this year's been slightly more challenging, but I have still got my distance in. But that you've just got to be determined. I think you've just got to have that approach to it, but also be have that degree of flexibility in terms of, okay, so I've not been able to do it today, but I can go tomorrow. I can build it in somewhere else. So being clever with your training, I think, to an extent.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was also stalking your Facebook page. You're not on Strava, so I had to do some kind of preparation before the thing. So I see you're also fundraising for Bloodwise.
Yeah, I did do some fundraising for Bloodwise. It's actually my ex-husband's mum, so I suppose my ex-mother-in-law. She was diagnosed with blood cancer a couple of years ago. Sadly, we lost her, not last year, the year before. But despite having been divorced from my husband, still had a lot of affection for his family. And as a consequence, when I decided to run, or when I was running London, I decided to do it for Bloodwise. In fact, I did it for Bloodwise and Parkinson's, because his mum had been diagnosed with blood cancer and his dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's. So I did it for both charities. And as part of that, because Isaac, our son, he was their only grandchild, I sort of got him involved, and we did the Overgate Midnight Walk, which I did last year, which fell the same night as the Great North Run. So the Overgate Midnight Walk, 13 miles, was literally midnight, 3.5 hours I think it took Isaac and I to walk it. He was 12 at the time. And then we travelled up to Newcastle for me to run the Great North Run. So, I'm saying that I didn't necessarily prepare particularly well for the wall, but having done a 13-mile run at midnight and then travelled up to Newcastle. So we did that specifically for Bloodwise. So it was interesting to sort of do to finish the midnight walk and then have half an hour's kip and then jump on the Lions fun bus up to Newcastle at 5:30 in the morning. And Isaac came with us, and he stood and supported me while I did the Great North Run. It wasn't my fastest time, but then it never was going to be. But I'd actually said I'd set off with a friend who was doing the Great North for the first time, who's a far steadier runner, which is, it's, like I said, she was coming from sort of only running sporadically to doing a half marathon. So I set off running with her, but then ended up losing her and coming in sort of half an hour before she did. So I was able to sort of support her when she came in. So it's very much a charity close to kind of our hearts, and that's why we picked that charity, sort of that connection to his grandparent, really. It was good to be able to, and actually I did 5k, having not run particularly a great deal since the wall. Isaac and I went out for a run on Tuesday, and we both had our Bloodwise tops on, so it was quite nice. It's kind of a nice thing for us to be able to do together.
Yes.
Now he's sort of an age where he can sort of appreciate. I mean, to be fair, when I don't think the children really quite understood the concept of running an ultra. Well, how can they? Age 5, 7. Isaac more so, because he's sort of, he was 12 at the time, but. So I kind of screenshot of the United Kingdom or whatever, and I said, right, this is where I'm starting and this is where I'm finishing. And they were like, what? I was like, yeah, I'm going to run from there to there. What? That look of, I don't understand. Right, well, running. Well, I'm going to run, and having that sort of concept
I know that reaction
that face well. Mind you, to be fair, my parents were probably pretty much the same as well. Like, what? A lot of people actually have had the same reaction. Why would you even want to do that?
Because it's fun. It's going out playing with your friends for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good environment to do it in, isn't it? I mean, what else would you be doing on a Saturday?
Yeah. So. Just trying to I've been trying to think about the right kind of question, the right way to phrase it. So hopefully this comes across in the right way, because as we discussed when I first messaged you on Facebook and beforehand, one of the reasons why I was very keen to share your story is because I always think that people like to aspire to people that are ahead of them, but not necessarily miles and miles and miles ahead in the distance, where you think, I'm never going to do that. The likes of Yasmin Paris, for example, hugely inspirational, but I don't believe I'm ever going to run the way she does.
No.
And so, I'm quite kind of very interested to listen to what she does, but actually I'm even more interested listening to people are just kind of not 10 steps ahead of me, but 1 or 2 or 3 steps ahead of me, and think about it. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, with where you are in your running journey and where you've got to, is what do you think stops you from moving on to what you would see as the next level? Because obviously you have moved up a number of levels in the story that you've been sharing. Is it about physical development, getting better at running? Is it about confidence? Is it about finding the balance with family? What is it that you've seen kind of change for you and allow you to progress the way you have done?
I guess for me, that in running terms, initially it was something that I wanted to do just as sort of a fitness thing, and I don't think, because I've got friends who have always run since they were little, they've always had that that competitiveness, I suppose. Whereas for me, I think the competitiveness perhaps came secondary. It was just as a consequence of the fact that I was getting better. And it's difficult because in terms of aspirations, I've always kind of known what I want to do in running terms, and that's not being influenced by anybody else, if that makes sense. It's more a case of, I knew that I wanted to run a marathon, and it was almost that I was lucky. I feel lucky that I got a good for age place. I don't necessarily see it as, I've never felt particularly that I've got an ability at running, and I would think that other people would say, don't be stupid because you've achieved this, this and this, you've got a good for age place. How many people have got a good for age place? And I don't necessarily see it as something that I'm good at. I've never seen it as something that I'm good at. So as a consequence, I think the kind of aspirations have been more of, yes, I want to run London, and I've done that, and then it was, I really loved doing the coast to coast walk with my dad when I was younger, and that took us 12 days, but now I don't really walk, I run. So if I'm going to do something that's comparative, then that to me is the wall. So I don't think I don't necessarily feel like I'm aspiring to I don't compare myself necessarily to anybody. And I think the only times I have done is when I've come back to running after like pregnancy, and I recognise that I'm way back, in fitness levels from where I was previously. And that's a tough lesson, is sort of recognising that you don't necessarily bounce back after something. And now I think I don't actually, as much as I've said I'm not going to do the wall again, it was a fantastic event, and there is a big part of me that would like to do it again. But I'm not sure when. And talking to you before about events that you've done, and I think I'd be more inclined to do a different event than go back and do one that I've done before.
Excuse me.
Partly because it's too easy to compare yourself.
Yes.
And it's too easy to put pressure on yourself to be better than you were.
Yeah.
And I've certainly found that with friends and marathons, in wanting to achieve a better time each time, and kind of losing the pleasure in it, I suppose. And maybe I've just been lucky in certainly in my marathons that each one I've done, I've got slightly better.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't expect to in this last one, because my training was sort of slightly different to how it had been previously, but yet I still managed a PB by, I don't know what it was, maybe 24 seconds or something like that, but it doesn't matter. And I'm trying to think whether I'd have been slightly disappointed if I'd not bettered it, but I don't think I would, because I had a better experience. And equally, I think when I thought about doing the wall, you know, I sort of looked at it and thought, you know, I can probably do this in a reasonable time if I can. But then I suppose, what's a reasonable time for an ultra? I mean, it's crazy times. It's and for me, it was just always about doing the event.
Yeah.
Which is probably makes me different to a lot of people.
Well, it does, but I think it's really good to share it, because I think a lot of people get put off trying some events because they think they're going to get judged on the time, or because they're putting so much pressure on themselves because of the time.
Yeah.
And so that's again why I was really interested to share this kind of story, because as you say, you can go and do these events and have an incredible time without getting hung up on how fast you're doing it.
Yeah, very much
Now,
so.
I mean, to be fair, you do them in great times. But
I don't know whether, well, the wall probably less so. I think I could have probably done that quicker if I'd have.
Yeah.
That's partly, I suppose, the attraction in going back again, I suppose, is thinking that I could probably do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reason why I did 2 spine challenges, is because I did the first one and I wasn't really ready for it. I dragged myself to the end and thought, okay, there's so much I can do different. And my first one was close to 46 hours.
Right.
My second one was close to 36 hours. I took just
Yeah.
over 10 hours off.
That's ridiculous, isn't it?
So I think that was a good choice. You know, I went back and I really did make a huge difference there. The next event where I'm actually going to run exactly the same race again, because generally I don't run the same races. I've done the Home Moss Fell race twice, took 40 minutes off. I'm doing the Lakeland 100 again next year.
Right.
But that is mainly because it was probably the most fun I've had on an ultra.
Well, yeah.
It's a really fun event.
Yeah.
And now I'll know even more people when I go back and have even more fun, hopefully.
Yeah.
So
do you not ever think there's a danger of being disappointed because you don't have the same experience?
Well, that's one of the reasons why. Because last year I did the Oldham Way Ultra, and we had a fantastic experience. That we a group of people who maybe 2 of them knew each other before. I'd certainly not met any of the others before the race. We ended up with 5 of us finishing the race in joint second place.
All right.
And you can't make it up.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't happen again. And in the end, I didn't do the race again this year because I knew I couldn't have the same experience.
Yeah.
And so my only other choice was kind of to make it a different experience would be go and race it harder, try and be much faster. But then I decided on the same day there was a very, very tough fell race in the Lake District, a teenager with altitude.
All right.
So I decided that would be a kind of a bigger learning experience.
Yeah.
It put me completely out of my comfort zone. I was 7th last to finish.
Were you?
So it definitely did. It definitely put me out of my comfort zone.
Yeah. No.
Because like you have been describing about struggling in the heat, I also struggle in the heat. It was Easter Saturday. It was just the heat came from nowhere. Cold, red hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think mentally, as soon as I know it's going to be hot, that's it for me. I'm out.
I'm getting better. I'm learning to manage it.
Yeah.
But, which again, because of that bad experience, when I started the Lakeland 100 the Friday night, it was 21 Celsius at 6 p.m. when we started, and I just approached it slightly differently, having had that bad experience. So it's slowly coming.
Yeah. It's I think because we've had a few summers where it has been warmer, I think I've been able to run better in the heat. Not that I would ever choose for that, especially for distance running. It's not something.
So that's why you need to get into races like the Spine race in the middle of January.
It's freezing, I know. Crazy. I must admit, at one stage I sort of looked at it and I thought, wow, yeah, this could be good, and then just thought, no, not doing it. It's crazy challenge.
Yeah, it's different.
But I think that's the thing with running, is that it's all relative, isn't it? You know, and my sister's about to undertake her first Great North Run. She's never run. She never used to run. She's never run. She had a car. She had a car accident when she was 16. She got knocked down by a vehicle, and you know, she's never shown any interest in running. But she's about to do Great North this weekend, and I'm so chuffed for her and so proud of her that she's undertaking it. Because it's all relative.
It is.
You know, and it upsets me when people say, well, you know, I don't do the distances that you do, or I don't do the times that you do. It's like, it's nonsense. You know, everybody's different, and everybody runs differently and different paces, and it's just, you know, it's all relative.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of the things that I really like about running, is that in a club like Stainland Lions that we're both in a club like that, you can have, you know, you can have Couch to 5K going on.
Oh yeah.
And you can have people like James, who we've mentioned, who's done more than 100-mile ultras, and everyone in between. Yeah. And
yeah, absolutely.
We can all kind of get together in huge groups of people, go out on runs, on especially on a Thursday night. And it's so good how there's so few other sports where people can be at completely different levels, where everybody's pushing themselves, yet you can spend some time together actually doing the sport. Yeah. I can't think of another sport that's like that.
No.
And yeah, okay, I know with London Marathon and things, the elite runners get put in a separate pen and they start off first. But actually on most races, and when you bring it down to a more local level, the really elite guys at the front are starting literally alongside everybody else, which again is very unique in sport. You know, Premier League footballers are never on the same pitch as grassroots players. Never.
No.
You know, it just never happens.
Yeah.
And Formula One racing drivers are never, you know, there with the local go-karting kids. You know, and running's the one sport that kind of brings people together. It
does, and I don't think I ever appreciated that really until I started running, and I never really thought I'd get so much pleasure from it either. You know, going back to the very start of what we were saying, and I was very much a reluctant runner and had to persuade myself to get out the door. But then once I was out, and then once I was past a certain distance, that's it. I felt like I could go on forever. Yeah. And it was great.
Yeah, which reminds me of the last episode. I was talking with Anna, who I ran 20 hours with on the Lakeland 100, and her daughters, her daughters are preparing to do a 100-mile ultra. I think they'll be 15 and 16 when they do it.
Really?
And it's a very interesting episode. I was impressed with their kind of grown-up attitude towards it and making good decisions. But I asked them what they thought I should say to my 14-year-old son about running, to try and get him interested. And what they said was very similar to what you've just said, which is what reminded is that every time you go for a run, you never regret it.
No.
Every time you push yourself out the door, and I've had it lots of times, and I'm sure you've had it the same when you've been training. I'll say to Val, my wife, I really don't feel like going out for this run tonight, and she'll say, get out the door. Because every time when you come back, you never once say, I wish I hadn't gone out the door.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then you get this, you know, those special ones like I had last night. I happened to the kind of just the way my day worked out. The time I had to go running was around 5 p.m. yesterday,
Yeah.
which is when we had 40-mile-an-hour winds and torrential rain. It was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah,
I loved it.
Yeah, I must admit, I love running in the. I've run in all conditions, but I do love running in a downpour.
Yeah.
But then I've looked back on pictures where I'm running in the snow, and I can think, God, that was great too. Road shoes in the snow. It's just like, I don't know.
Oh well, when it snows next, give us a shout. There's a whole bunch of us from the club that as soon as it snows, we're out in the snow. Love it.
Yeah, it's just amazing, being able to, and especially where we live, because there's just so much opportunity for different types of runs as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got a lot of pictures and memories from various runs that might not have gone quite how I'd expected, but that have been brilliant for the fact that they didn't go as I expected.
Yep.
So, I love the Col d'Azur Way relay, the team event that we do, and I absolutely love it because it's.
You see, I had a slightly bad experience on that. I was doing leg 4, but I was doing it with a guy who was. We've run together before, and we were a similar pace. On the day, he was just faster than me. He was ahead of me all the time. And it was just painful, just trying to keep up.
Yeah.
Now, as it happens, I looked at the splits because I was in the vets team.
Yeah.
And we were fourth, the vets, the male vets team.
Yeah.
I know the ladies vets team won, of course.
That was us.
Yeah.
I was in that team.
Brilliant result. We were fourth, and I looked at the third place team to see, where did we lose the time.
Yeah.
Every single leg other than leg 4. Leg 4 that I was in was the only one. No, we only took a couple of minutes off them. It wasn't very much, but at least we were faster than them on that one. Because I was feeling really bad how much I slowed Paul down. But at least we were faster than the team that beat us on that leg.
I know it's hard it is hard if you're running in pairs, but you see, sometimes that's just not possible for like the events that you and I, you do. You do have to rely on other people and other support. But I do. Col d'Azur Way relay is a race that I do enjoy, and you see you can do that as an ultra, can't you? And it had crossed my mind.
I did kind of do it as a training run.
Did you?
Just to see what it was all like.
Which leg do I want to do? I know. I'll run it all in one go and I'll find out which leg I want to do. Obviously.
Yeah, that was quite tough.
Which was your favourite leg?
Probably is leg 4, actually.
Is it?
Yeah.
See, I've only ever run. I've done various legs, but leg 2 is the one that I always end up racing.
Yeah.
That is a race to me. Because I don't know, it's into club, isn't it? And
well, you as you say, you're representing the club, and like you say, you're like I say, I felt like I was kind of letting other people down a bit because I wasn't as fast as the guy I was with, but actually, no, he was just fast.
Yeah,
he should have been in the first team rather than in the vets, I think. But yeah. Although the last inter-club thing we did was the score event.
All right.
And James, Leon and we scored almost twice as many points as anybody else.
All right.
So
yeah.
that was good.
Yeah. No, I do like, I like the, I was vets captain a couple of years ago for Stainland. So, I do like to sort of promote those, but unfortunately, just purely because of circumstance, I've only been able to do a few of those this year. So, but yeah, it's all good stuff though.
It is. I actually do very little relatively with the club because I'm so focused on the big long stuff. Yeah. That it's. I was at the club run last Thursday with Leon. It was a good run. He showed me a new trail, which is what I was running on last night.
Right. Yeah, and that's another advantage of being in the club because there's so many people there that know so many different routes that I've lived in Greetland, and then I've always lived locally for the last 40 odd years, and and you see new routes, which is great. Yeah. In training. So.
Right, well, we should probably wrap this up because I'm sure we'll both natter on for the for the rest of the night.
I'll babble forever.
It's been a pleasure. Really interesting to hear your story, and I know a lot of people will be interested to listen to it. So I usually finish off with some kind of question, so something obvious like, what would you say to somebody who's thinking about doing the first marathon and thinking they can't fit the time in for the training, and they've got kids and they're working, and
my advice would be to not put it off. I suppose it's a classic that you don't know what's around the corner, and if you've got a strong desire to achieve something, is to go out and do it. Don't just give it lip service. You can fit it in. I think it's easy enough to say that you can't, or persuade yourself that you can't, but then how genuine is your desire to want to achieve what it is that you're setting out to achieve? And I think if you set your mind to it, there's ways and means of being able to do it. Some of my training was done with the boys on the bikes because that was the only way I could get the training in. Yeah. So I think it's thinking clever about it and being determined to do it and not putting it off.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Emma. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. That was Running Your Stories, episode 27 with Emma Forrester Thompson. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe to us on your podcast app so that you get the latest episodes downloaded. Please subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whichever you prefer. On Instagram, which comes through to Facebook, we try to post inspirational running pictures a few times a week. So follow us there and you'll get some great pictures as well as getting the latest information about the podcasts. Thank you very much. Goodbye.